Is it finally time to bench Verina? Well, not exactly. But let me explain. So we recently got our first look at the upcoming 1.2 characters, and I wanted to talk about this girl right here. Wait.
折枝
Yeah, this girl. The description tells us that she's a painter of some sorts, which gives me massive artist from Lost Ark vibes. For those who didn't have to experience how painful it is to teach randoms on the internet basic raid patterns, artists in Lost Ark give team-wide damage boosts by swinging around their little paintbrushes. So you're starting to see where I'm coming from with this, right? Am I saying that she's 100% undeniably going to be a support? No. For all I know, she could be a main DPS and go full Doctor ratio, launching paintbrushes at Mach 10 speed at people. But regardless of what role ends up as, I did want to talk about an interesting question that did pop up in my head lately. What would the first limited 5-star support in Wuthering Waves look like? We're still very early on in the game's lifespan, so there's a lot that's still up in the air about how these supports would function, but I wager I could make a pretty educated guess based on how Kuro does team building in PGR and how they handle the roles that each member in the 3-person team fulfills. Before we continue though, if you want to see more Wuthering Waves and gacha content like this, be sure to like and subscribe. I talk about all things Wuthering Waves and Honkai Star Rail. Now without further ado, let's get on with the video. The first thing I want to make sure we're clear on is the fact that right now, Verina is by far one of the most important units to someone to count in the entire game. Her quick and simple rotations, her ability to easily proc the healing set and run the bell echo, and her schmeedy universal damage buffs all make her a very important part of our meta teams today. The thing is, with how many DPS and sub-DPS characters we've been getting over the past 2 patches, there's a dilemma, there's a conundrum, a problem that more and more players are facing now. We need 3 teams to fully challenge Tower of Adversity, but there's only one Verina to go around. Verina's damage amplification abilities and boost to survivability and safety really makes you feel like you're leaving the other teams to dry if you don't have her in her team. So it's only a matter of time that Kuro releases a limited 5-star support to bless us and save us from this team building drought, right? Well, yes, eventually. But now we gotta sit back and ask ourselves the question I brought up earlier. What would such a limited 5-star support look like? And more importantly, what would Kuro have to do to that character's kit to make them an undeniable, a demonstrable, and irrefutable upgrade to a standard support like Verina? In that case, I don't think we need to look any further than how Kuro handles PGR to make a pretty educated guess for this. Same company, same 3-member party system, similar combat system revolving around swapping between rotations and performing QTE-like attacks. There's a lot of similarities here that could give us a pretty good baseline expectation for how they will balance the roles of the different character archetypes in Wuthering Waves. So just let me cook here. The thing is, in PGR, teams generally fall into a fixed pattern: 1 big dog DPS, 1 amplifier support, and 1 tank. If we take a look at the amplifiers and tanks for the different meta teams and ignore all the fluff of their ability descriptions, like honestly, what is this? Where's the Spark Notes version? You can see a pretty noticeable pattern. The DPS, believe it or not, they do damage. The amplifiers provide heals, boost the team's attack, and elemental damage for the amplifier's element. The tanks, on the other hand, do some combination of reducing the enemy's defense and lowering their resistance to the tank's specific element. So, if we bring this all back to Wuthering Waves and look at a team like Kalcharo, Yinlin, and Verina, we can kind of see bits and pieces of that design philosophy from PGR making its way into Wuthering Waves. Kalcharo, surprise surprise, is the main DPS. Yinlin has a lot of amplifier utility in her kit because she can provide coordinated attack damage, boost Kalcharo's electro damage, as well as his resonance liberation damage. Verina also fills in some of that amplifying role through her damage deepen outro and her easy access to the healing set bonus. So if you've been following along and taking notes, some alarms might have started ringing in your noggin. High alert, code red type stuff. You might have noticed that there's 1, or should I say 2, elements of PGR's team building that's missing from Wuthering Waves: defense shred and elemental resistance penetration. Defense ignore and elemental resistance reduction in Wuthering Waves is an extremely underutilized source of extra damage that barely appears outside of some characters' talents or resonance chains. It doesn't appear in specific echo passives, set bonuses, just these random places that aren't easily accessible. So my takeaway after looking at all this, and what my educated guess really boils down to, is that our first limited 5-star support, whether it's actually Zhe or not, will feature these untapped defense shred and elemental resistance penetration buffs. And these kit features will work just fine in how we build our teams, because not only are these forms of damage amplification inherently super strong by themselves, but they won't overlap with the buffs provided by the sub-DPS in the teams and cause diminishing returns. The effects of damage bonuses, buffs, and debuffs in Wuthering Waves work multiplicatively with each other, meaning that most of the time, it's more effective to have buffs of different types rather than overloading putting on one single type of damage buff. In general, if I wanted to really juice up my Kalcharo in a fight, it'd be much better to spread out the buffs between things like attack up, electro damage up, resonance liberation damage up, damage deepen, than to completely go all in and full send resonance liberation damage buffs. And since outro skill effects like Yin Lin's that boost resonance liberation damage are lost upon swapping to another character, it's pretty much pointless to run 2 supporting characters with these kinds of buffs over having one supporting character with buffs like damage deepen that will persist even if you swap to a different character. So long story short, I'm almost convinced that our first limited 5-star support will really emphasize defense ignore and elemental resistance penetration in their kit, which ensures that their buffs don't overlap and cause diminishing returns with the effects provided by our known sub-DPS characters. This will make it so that you can actually have a solid, complete team with a well-balanced set of buff sources, and where the effects of all 3 members' kits actually synergize and support one another. But now the question is, how niche would this support be? Will we run into a situation like Ron Mei in HSR, where the limited 5-star supports are a little too universal? And does that mean Verina will actually be relegated to a complete bench warmer? Well, right now, I think it's a little too early to tell. They could do it like in HSR, where supports are generally good, but have clear parts of their kits that are focused more towards a certain playstyle niche. But they could also do it like in PGR, where the support kit is heavily focused on a specific elemental or playstyle niche. But I think whichever way they go with this, it's very likely that until they release 3 dedicated limited 5-star supports, your Verina will still find a place in your team, since we still need 3 complete teams with well-balanced buffs to complete the Tower of Adversity. Obviously, I know what you're thinking. Some people have already been able to full clear the tower, but speaking from a baseline level of investment and skill level, you would ideally want 3 complete teams to challenge the tower. Fortunately, that means you can keep using your Verina every other week, but for those who aren't fans of Verina, she'll continue to haunt you by getting smacked out of the air while she's in the middle of her intro skill animation. On a different note though, all this talk about what a limited 5-star support can do does raise another concern that to prevent these defense ignore and elemental shredding support from completely steamrolling and trivializing content, we will inevitably see enemies in the Tower of Adversity and other endgame modes have bigger and bigger health pools and defense values and mechanics to stall your time. It's an unfortunate reality of gacha games, so it's important that we keep this in mind when we really think about who we want to pull for down the line. That's going to do it for this video. These are just some of my thoughts using what I know from playing PGR myself on what we could potentially see in our first limited 5-star support and what that potentially means for how we build our teams and do damage in higher end content. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think though. What do you think we would see in our first limited 5-star support? Do you think they'd be specific to a certain playstyle, element, or just function as a general all-around support? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts. Once again, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. Consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you all in the next one.